guys, I'm Courtney, your host of Flight of Fancy. Thanks for joining me on episode 2. I'm here with my sister Charis, who is actually my guest for this second episode. And we are here in beautiful Playa del Carmen, Mexico.
Yeah.
But before we get started, I just wanted to introduce you guys again. Like I said, this is my sister. She is going to enlighten us on her research company, Travel Gene, as well as her project, Stamped. So, Charis, if you want to get us started and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you first for having me on your podcast. I'm super excited. So I have been really interested in the tourism industry. I've always loved to travel. And then when I found out it was actually something you could pursue academically, I jumped on that. And it's really just become an evolution of interests and trying to fill in gaps that exist in the field. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
So, Travel Gene, can you tell us a little bit more about what to expect with Travel Gene? Like, what steps are you taking for that?
Sure. So again, Travel Gene is a research and education development company, specifically interested in researching the travel behaviors of African American or Black population. I really became interested in this group after doing a project in school, specifically with regard to study abroad. And so I thought many years later, like, this would be a really cool opportunity to turn into a business. So we specialized in the travel trends of African Americans, and then another leg of the company focuses on study abroad experiences for students of color. So the name Travel Gene is kind of a play off of the notion that African Americans don't travel. That myth is just oddly still one that exists in spaces around the world. And so Travel Gene and our tagline, it's in our DNA, is kind of a play off of that naturally it is something that we do and here, there, and everywhere.
So where did that come from? Like, where do you think people think that African Americans don't travel?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times it stems from maybe a lot of what we see in media. I've done a little bit of work on tourism marketing, and there are missing faces that exist in that space. And so I think largely then it became the myth that individuals of color are not traveling internationally. Those same sentiments are ascribed to things like camping or skiing. So some of these organizations that we see kind of dominated by other people in the market. And I think that notion just kind of spread through mass media.
Awesome. So what inspires you? Like, who or where do you get your information from?
Sure. Well, I think just my own experiences kind of inspired me to take a deeper look at this. Certainly traveling was something that we grew up doing and was a natural and huge priority in our family. And so when I began hearing these stories of people not traveling, I thought, well, what is that? And decided to branch out and do something about it. So in terms of inspiration within the travel space, I think Zim, who initially created Travel Noir, and Evita Robinson, who created Nomadness Travel Tribe, were huge inspirations to me in terms of putting at least images of African Americans into a broader spectrum. And then certainly a host of professors that have inspired me on the research line to keep going, and that this work matters and needs to be a part of major research journals.
So so far, what has been your biggest accomplishment since starting Travel Gene?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm really proud. As of I think 2 weeks ago now, presented my research at NAFSA, which is a large international education conference. So literally over 10,000 people from around the world gather to talk about the most pressing issues within our field. And so I had an opportunity to present my research at NAFSA through a poster session. Really my efforts in that space are to help broaden the conversation. So many people often say that, oh, it's just not enough money. Students don't have money to travel. And we know that there's a host of scholarships that are available to students, not discounting the fact that it can be costly. But there are avenues to address that. But I think there's a broader conversation in terms of travel and what that means in the African American community. And I think advisors who are not of color, it would be helpful to have a broader sense of what that means. So yeah, that's probably been my most exciting success. And then also had an opportunity on the broad tourism perspective to present at the Clemson University first ever symposium on race and leisure. So that was great to get feedback from really leaders in the field.
Yeah. So travel is a big part of what you do. So can you share your first experience going abroad?
Oh, sure. So my first experience traveling abroad was when I was about 16 years old, and I went with a company called American Music Abroad, and the organization takes high school students who participate in a jazz band, a concert band, and a chorus, and we do a 3-week tour. My program was to Europe. And so we spent 3 weeks traveling around and playing in different cities and neighborhoods within Europe. So it was an amazing experience.
So where were some of the locations that you went on this tour?
Switzerland was often an awesome experience. We were only there for a day, so I feel like I need to revisit.
Definitely.
Wink, wink, sister trip next.
Number 2.
Austria was huge. We were there for a bit longer time period. And so Austria was really great. I mean, the scenery was just absolutely beautiful. And then Paris, of course, which I've been in love with since I was like in the 2nd grade when I took a summer school class on French. But yeah, so Paris was another location, and Germany was great. Dinkelspiel, Germany.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We definitely had some of the same locations.
Oh, right.
So I guess we can share Paris and Germany, but just
absolutely.
for Germany, I guess a different location. So I was in Cologne, Germany, so that was pretty dope as well. So would you say that this trip or that trip kind of sparked a little bit of the travel notion, or?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, like I said, of course, growing up, our family always took trips to the beach, and then morphed those into broader locations, places like Florida, New Mexico, Alabama were some of the sites that we visited as a family.
And we also had educational pieces in those too.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. So it wasn't just going to the beach, but we went to the beach, and then the next day we went to the Wright Brothers Museum, or
that ghost town.
Ghost town in Santa Fe. And so I think that's been a natural part of what we've carried into our travel experiences as adults. Like, we always try to balance the fun and leisure with something educational. So we definitely have kept that going. And as for the trip at 16, yeah, I definitely think it sparked an interest about how kids were living in other parts of the United States, because I was on the program with students from New Jersey and New York, and they were just so different and seemed like just so independent from how I grew up in Virginia. So, but then also definitely sparked an interest in other locations around the world.
Awesome. And so let's talk a little bit about our educational piece that we did yesterday. We definitely went on an excursion yesterday, which was amazing.
Yeah.
So you want to dive in and talk about that?
Sure. Well, I feel like, and our tour guide kind of echoed this yesterday, but the Chichen Itza is often one of the, I guess, more widely known archaeological sites in Mexico. It's widely publicized by the government, and it's identified as one of the 7 wonders of the world, and so it naturally has all this acclaim to it. But I've recently been hearing more about Tulum, and so there was an opportunity to take an excursion to Tulum to see those archaeological sites, and it was absolutely amazing. Yeah, when you climb the steps and get to the highest elevation, you just see the beautiful ocean behind it. It was amazing. And then as an added bonus, we had an ATV ride through the forest. Yeah, I let her drive since she'd never done ATVs before, and I held on for dear life. Just kidding. She was good. But yeah, so we ATV'd through the jungle. And then we also had an opportunity to swim in a cenote, which is basically just a sinkhole. Absolutely beautiful. That was probably one of the dopest experiences I've had. Yeah.
So for anyone that is from Virginia or has visited Virginia, Luray Caverns is a hot spot. And pretty much if you've been to Luray, that's kind of what the cenote is, minus the water. So it was pretty awesome. It was a nice, cool, refreshing swim. Just able to see, what was it, stalagmites? I always get those confused. So, but sorry. Yeah, one of those. So let's backtrack a little bit into, I know Travel Gene is your research and development company.
Yes.
But you also have your project Stamped.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Stamped.
Okay. So Stamped was a way to inspire people to travel abroad. And I'm specifically using Stamped now as a way to highlight and promote study abroad experiences. So specifically to students of color. I think about my time going to university, and I was one that was, I think, very connected to the university and plugged in, but for some reason I just never really got connected to the study abroad side. My experience came in grad school where it's like, hey, you want to go to X place? Awesome, we need $3,000 next week. And I was like, what? No. So I think I try to lead with that as I mentor my students in terms of opportunities that they can take advantage of with regard to funding, but then also just knowing about study abroad experiences and how the money exchange works. So you could, in essence, pay the same amount or less than what you're currently paying at your university and have an international experience. So this tries to tie in a bit of that educational piece, but also highlighting students who have done it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you said you're students, so can you tell the world what your current role is right now?
Sure. So currently I'm Assistant Director of International Programs at a small private institution in Virginia, and serving a very high population of students of color, actually. And so it's been a really unique opportunity to dive into this field, a huge learning curve, but it's been really exciting. It's also been really exciting to see how my work in just larger travel has been able to inform some of the programs and services that we've been able to provide for our students.
Awesome. And I just thought about this, so can we kind of backtrack a few years ago when you decided to leave the U.S. and jump into China?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's a great point. So when I figured out that travel was something that was actually being studied at the institution where I was working, I decided, well, you get some classes for free, like just dabble in it and see what happens. And so I got a master's in sustainable tourism, where I focused on African American.
Smart, y'all.
And I just have a lot of degrees. Take advantage of the free courses if you work at a university. But I totally lost my track. So yeah, I did a project in one of my cross-cultural communication classes on the lack of study abroad participation by minority students, and was like, I think this is a field I could kind of get down with, and was interested in working in the field after I graduated, but really just was not having any luck. Like, lots of thank you but no thank you letters. So one night I just decided to apply through a program that a friend had recommended, Eclipse, and applied for a position to teach. They recruited in either China or Korea. I checked both because I had never been to both, so I thought, why not? And very quickly they wrote back and said they were interested. I interviewed, ended up getting placed at Education First, or EF for short, in Shenzhen, China. So I was there for a year and 7 months before I got the position in the States. So,
So what do you think the biggest gap was being in China, and what did you have to learn while you were there?
Well, definitely the language, because I didn't know the language at all. That would often be people's comment to me, like, you speak Chinese? And I would say no, but when I was 16, and when it brought a point and a smile got me far, so I think the same will happen here. I did try to learn Chinese, but it was a huge fail, like, before I left. The only thing that would stick would be ni hao. So at least I could say hello to people, but beyond that, it was a wrap. But being there, definitely, I realized quickly I needed to learn how to count, I needed to learn direction, and I needed to know how to explain what I didn't like in my food. So yeah, being there definitely had an impact on my language development skills, because it was not happening here in isolation. So that was one thing. And then I think just learning about there's so much history and culture in China, and I think just all the cultural festivals and the meanings behind those festivals, I think, was really interesting to learn all of those stories. So yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the Chinese New Year?
Oh, sure. So my first year there, I was probably, I'd probably been there for about a month, and Chinese New Year happened, and I mean, basically the town shut down. Like, there was
Shut it down.
Yeah, there were no restaurants were closed. Some of the Western restaurants, where you could get American food, they were open still, but many of, like, the mom and pop shops, they were out and would be gone for like a month. So the celebrations start off by fireworks, like, every day. Usually some type of, like, parades or engagement in the parks. And you make lots of dumplings and eat those. Just a festive time for families to get together. I think they call it the largest mammal migration on the planet, because literally people are taking planes, trains, automobiles to get home. I do think there's some shift that China is experiencing now. I felt like my second year there were more things open and more things to do. And a lot of what I'm seeing now are younger people inviting their families to other places. So instead of going back home to, like, the village, they're inviting their family to Shenzhen, or inviting their family to Shanghai. So a little bit different trends are taking place, but I think still the emphasis is on being together with family.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
it just seems like you had a world tour.
Yeah, it was awesome. We were situated in the Pearl River Delta area, so we were simply a ferry ride away from, like, Guangzhou, Macau, Zhuhai, Hong Kong. You could get to by ferry, but we were just like 30 minutes by metro, so we would more likely take the metro. Yeah, so lots of opportunities there. I did get to branch out a bit and go to Beijing and Singapore.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what are some travel tips that you would give anyone looking to explore anywhere?
Oh boy.
What are some tidbits that have worked for you, or just anything that you would recommend a new traveler or even a seasoned traveler?
Yeah, sure. So I laugh with everybody and tell them that I used to be kind of a bougie traveler before I went to China, because I don't know, I just take the hassle away. I needed plans and just tell me where to show up kind of deal. But China really opened my eyes to different ways of traveling. It was the first time I'd ever stayed in a hostel. There's a site called Hostel World, I believe it's .com. But if you type in,
pretty fun.
Yeah, if you type in Hostel World, it comes up with literally a slew of hostels all over the world. And I actually learned about that because my friend and I was meeting me in Beijing, and I was telling my peers about it, and they were like, absolutely not. You cannot pay that much for a hotel. Cancel it now. Get this hostel. And it was literally so cheap, but it was the nicest place. We met so many people from literally all over the world. So I would say don't frown your nose up at hostels. You can find them at all levels. So that was a really good experience. When I first arrived in China, as I said, I really didn't know the language, so it was important for me to get around. And so I would oftentimes take pictures of the location where I was going that had the pinyin, which is like basically American letters, and then the characters, so a taxi driver would know where to go if I didn't know how to exactly say the place or give them directions to it. So I would make sure I had a picture of the location with the address written in that language, so I could just show it, and they knew where to take me. So that was good. Yeah.
So let's go into some of your inspiration. So who inspires you right now? Like, who do you look to in the travel world?
Yeah, so again, as I mentioned earlier, I think Zen was pretty, I was just infatuated with like the travel noir movement. I think I found out about them first, and then my cousin actually shared the information about Nomadness with me and learned more about what they were doing. So really great organization for travelers of color, and really just inspiring them to see all parts of the world, especially in places where we don't necessarily go. So they've been featured a lot in Essence magazine for, doing Holi in India or running with the bulls. Yeah, so really cool experiences. So I definitely like the vibe that they have there within the travel space. Yeah.
And so what can we expect next for Travel Gene and Stamped?
So Travel Gene, I'm really interested in doing a research study that talks about the state of Black travel with regard to the experiences that students have come into the university with. Also areas of interest, so where are they looking to go and what barriers have an impact on their travel. So hoping to provide that in a research study, but also in an online course. So people within the industry of international education could have a broader sense of this background of traveling while Black, if you will, to bite off of a popular hashtag. And so, so that for Travel Gene is what I'm working on there. A little bit of a research study and a course that people can take online. And then Stamped, just definitely interested in building the stories up that I have right now. I'm kind of recounting my time in China. Certainly I have easy access to that while I curate the stories of students who have studied abroad. So can I just, if you're listening and you studied abroad, or you know a student who has studied abroad, who's identifies as Black or African American, I would love to talk to them to get their story featured on our
So I was going to say, with that little segue, so where can we find you, or how
Sure.
can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm stronger on Instagram and certainly my blog. So Instagram is at Travel Gene LLC, and on my blog website is Stamped by Travel Gene, and on Twitter it's Stamped by Travel Gene as well. And I'm trying to do better on Twitter.
And don't worry,
currently on the struggle bus.
We'll have all this information in the description, so you won't have to rewind this 500 times to write it down. So we'll definitely get that information there.
Thanks.
But what are some things that may not have gone so well with the inception of Travel Gene and Stamp? What are some struggles, if you will?
So I think I'm so new at like the creation of the business part, and I kind of identify as I'm a traveler, I'm a researcher, and I'm an educator. And I think oftentimes I get stuck in the researcher part. So I want to learn about everything, and I should instead be just do. So doing more than things that aren't actually producing. So that expands the reach of people who know about Travel Gene, or the information's making those connections. So yeah.
So what is some advice that you would give anyone who is either sitting on an idea or is currently taking the leap, like yourself?
Oh yeah, well, I think just definitely I'm going to tell you to do your research because that's just a part of who I am. But you need to know like what's in the field, what exists already, what gap can you meet, and how can you do that with the skills that you have. So I think that's important. But then the second is just, really just put it out there. The world needs your story, the world needs your ideas, the world needs your solutions, so just do it.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of wraps up our interview, but I just want to thank you again for joining me on episode 2. Even though she's episode 2, she's still number 1. But yeah, so stay tuned to our next episode 3, which will be dropping in about a few weeks or so. But yeah, thanks for joining us on our sister trip here in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. But until next time,
Yeah.
keep creating.